Before we get into this special weekend edition of Just the Truth, let me tell you about the latest special from Michael and Dell at MyPillow. The standard MyPillow, normally $49.98 for a limited time only, just $14.88 with promo code Joey. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener specials, and see all the specials. There's a limited quantity of just 10 at this special price. That's $14.88 with promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studio. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Folks, as we've just come through some brutally cold weather, winter storms here in the Upstate, with more this weekend and more on the way, there's a reality many people don't see. When temperatures drop, for some of our neighbors, it's not just uncomfortable, it can be dangerous. There's organizations like Miracle Hill Ministries here in the Upstate doing some wonderful work. For decades, Miracle Hill Ministries has been on the front lines providing emergency shelter, recovery programs, foster care, and real pathways out of homelessness, all grounded in faith. Right now, Miracle Hill has been operating cold weather shelters across the Upstate, responding in real time to the needs that have been created by these winter storms. And next week, they're taking another step forward in Spartanburg, opening their first women's transitional housing unit there, helping people move from crisis to stability and independence. Join me now is Ryan Duerk, President and CEO of Miracle Hill Ministries, to talk about the work they're doing, how these winter shelters operate, and why this new transitional housing project is such a big deal in Spartanburg. Ryan, thanks for being with us. Thanks for the work you do and your team and all that you do in our community.
Yeah, good morning, Joey. Always a pleasure to talk.
Let's talk about Miracle Hill Ministries, how you guys have been serving the vulnerable populations across the Upstate for decades now. And as way of introduction, give our listeners an overview of the full scope of the ministry.
Sure. Miracle Hill is the largest provider of residential services to people experiencing homelessness in the upstate of South Carolina. So on any given night, we have roughly 650 men, women, and children staying in one of a variety of rescue missions, addiction recovery programs, transitional houses, or Christian foster homes. Concerning cold weather shelter, when the weather turns cold, we have a commitment to the Upstate that we won't turn anyone away. When it becomes deadly, it's important that we kind of get past all of our regular restrictions, and we just bring people in out of the cold to keep them safe and, show them the love of Christ. And so on cold nights, like what we had last night and we'll have this weekend, that can increase our numbers by several hundred. During the storm last weekend, we opened up ahead of the storm, and where we typically ask people to leave in the morning, we stayed open for the duration of the storm, which is our pleasure to do. Certainly greatly complicates our operations in those residential facilities.
Let's talk in a little more detail about those cold weather facilities. Tell us exactly what that looks like. Anyone can come in. What triggers the opening of one of those shelters?
Yeah, so we used to call it cold weather shelter. I think we're trying to use the terminology severe weather shelter. Traditionally, anytime the temperature dropped to 40 degrees or below, we would open the doors to those cold weather shelters and invite anybody out from the cold. It doesn't matter if they're, inebriated or mentally ill or unstable. The only thing that they can't be is violent towards themselves and towards others. When they come in, they certainly receive a warm smile, something to eat, toiletries, an opportunity to take a shower, and something to eat, and they get to stay the night. And then in the morning, typically they would get some breakfast and some coffee and then be on their way. Certainly we'd be encouraging them the entire time to walk around to the front door and check into our regular residential beds. Let me say one thing about the severe weather shelter. The reason we're kind of changing the name is certainly the cold is an issue, but it's also an issue when it's 100 degrees outside for extended days. It's also an issue when there's a hurricane on the horizon heading into the Upstate, as we had with Helene just a couple of years ago. We were open for several days during that time. Yeah.
Now, as I understand it, you don't turn people away. So how are you prepared for a number that you don't even know what that number is going into a particular evening or weekend?
We are prepared because of the generosity of our friends and donors. So, during cold weather shelter season, we just stock our cupboards with additional food, so that we can make sure that we have enough food to go around. And that's, achieved through food drives and donations from companies. We make sure that we have extra individuals on staff to support that effort. We bring in a security company to make sure that the cold weather shelters stay safe and people go through a metal detector on their way in. We just kind of double down on all of our efforts, but I would be lying if I didn't say it added stress to the overall system.
Yeah. Ryan Duerk is my guest today. He's president and CEO of Miracle Hill Ministries. If you're listening today and you like what you hear and you think I'd like to help this organization, go to miraclehill.org. You can very easily donate, and look, they're always needing volunteers as well. Now, Ryan, let's kind of shift gears here for a minute. I understand that you're opening Miracle Hill's first transitional house for women in Spartanburg next week. What's special about this facility, and who will it serve?
Sure. It's a great transition. We went from the front door of the organization. Now we're on the back door of the organization. So we found out about 20 years ago that there's a couple of things that we can do that greatly improve people's chances for long-term stability, sobriety, and health as an individual as they stabilize in our shelters. And one of those key elements is a transitional house. So what in the world is a transitional house? Well, it's a affordable living situation where the individual gets to live there cheaply, but continues to find accountability, as well as counseling and case management to help them stabilize kind of on their own in the Upstate. So we have been adding transitional houses all these years, and our goal has been thus far to make sure that we have at least one transitional house for every population in every facility. And where it's been this year is the only population that remained underserved in the Miracle Hill ecosystem was women in Spartanburg. So we are very pleased to be opening up a home for them. It's actually about 200 yards away from the mission, where women can stabilize within that shelter, or women and their children, and they can move over to this transitional house and continue to stabilize as they work towards their own independence. But that's not the end of the story, Joey. We need more transitional houses. I'm convinced that the fullness of our facilities is directly related to our inability to get people out the back door. We want to help people stabilize, but as people become employed and stabilize in the facility, as your listeners know and you know, there's a lack of affordable housing options for people to move into. So certainly we need more affordable housing in the Upstate, but one of the ways that Miracle Hill combats that is by helping people to stabilize in these transitional houses. So today we have 20 transitional houses, and we are on our way towards 30. I don't know that that's the final number, but I do believe that if we can relieve pressure on the back end, we can open up the front door for more individuals in need of help.
Yeah. Typically, how long does a person stay in one of the transitional houses?
They sign a program agreement for 6 months, which they can renew once or twice. Ideally, we want people out within a year and into their own independent living situation. But the situations we're dealing with often are very complicated. Sometimes it takes a little more time. And then sometimes people go into transitional housing, and in 6 months, they're ready to go into a place of their own. So we have some flexibility there, but we kind of take it 6 months at a time.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of those support services that you provide. We hear a lot of people say, well, I just need a job. But homelessness is more complex than really just housing and just jobs. Talk with us about some of the challenges you see with some of the men and women who come through your programs. Maybe they've had addiction issues, and you have special programs for men and women. So give us a little overview of like Overcomers and the Renewal Center.
Sure. So, the old school thinking certainly is they just need to go get a job and everything will be okay. Oftentimes we find that getting a job is like step number 20 on somebody's path to stability. Oftentimes they're dealing with trauma from living on the streets, or severe addiction issues, or mental illness, or organic disability issues, just a variety of very challenging situations. We have seen that a large percentage of the people that we serve certainly have addiction recovery issues. So we operate Overcomers for Men, which is an 80-bed Christ-centered discipleship program for men facing life-dominating issues, and Renewal for Women, which is a 44-bed facility that does the same thing. Our goal there is to take 7 months with that individual, really help them address the internal issues that they're dealing with while they kind of case manage their way towards stability. But we know that that kind of starts with an internal reflection on their situation. There's lots of other very specific issues that somebody deals with. I mentioned mental health, and we have partnerships to help people deal with their mental health issues, financial education. The list goes on and on and on. But when somebody comes to Miracle Hill, either we're going to provide those services or we're going to know the person in the community that we can point them towards that can assist them.
Yeah. My guest today is Ryan Duerk, President, CEO of Miracle Hill Ministries. For additional information, go to miraclehill.org, and you can see information about all the various ministries that they're involved in. And Ryan, you got some impressive numbers of 2025. I want to read some of those to you. 204,357 shelter beds provided, 361,020 meals served, 11,819 cold weather beds provided, 2,769 unique individuals served, 288 children fostered. That was in 2025. Obviously, community partnerships play a big role in your work. You're making a huge impact in upstate South Carolina. How do local churches, volunteers, businesses, donors contribute to sustaining these programs?
Yeah, we couldn't achieve those numbers without kind of two influences. Number one is the goodness of the Lord, and number two is the amazing support of our friends and volunteers. And it takes an army to accomplish that. So we need people to contribute with their time, their talents, and their treasures, whether they come alongside us with volunteering or specific skills that they can bring into the Miracle Hill system, or they're doing a food drive to provide food, or giving financially from what the Lord has blessed them with. We need tens of thousands of volunteer hours every year and thousands of donors that come alongside us. We're very blessed that the Lord provides in that way.
Yeah. So let's say we have some listeners, Ryan, today who say, I want to be involved in that, whether it's blessing someone through giving, volunteering, mentoring. Talk with us about that process, what some of the opportunities are, and how someone becomes involved with Miracle Hill Ministries.
If somebody's interested, the first place I would point them is to our website. That's miraclehill.org, and that can point them in a variety of different directions, whether they want to donate or they want to volunteer, or maybe they don't even really know what they want to do. Well, you can go to our website, call our front office, and myself or one of Miracle Hill's amazing staff members will talk with you and help you find what the right solution is for yourself or your group or your church. We certainly would be blessed to field any of those calls that we could get.
Yeah. Ryan, we have about a minute left. If you would, give a specific need that you may have presently.
I'll give two. The first one is canned goods. As I said, it takes an army to feed, upwards of 850, 900 people on a cold night. And so if individuals could organize food drives and just bring in shelf-stable canned goods, that would be a huge blessing to us. The second thing, well, let me say, a lot of people want to do coat drives, Joey. Mm-hmm. We've got enough coats to outfit every South Carolinian for like the next 5 years. Okay. So don't do a coat drive. The second thing I'll say is if you call up and talk to us, we will help you figure out items that we really need in the moment. It's constantly changing. But some of the things that we always need that aren't often donated are things like sugar and coffee and butter, things that aren't shelf stable, but we have to use each and every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Ryan Duerk, I applaud you for what you do and your team. You got a great team over there as well. Again, that's miraclehill.org, miraclehill.org. Give generously both your money and your time because that is needed as well. Thank you again for what you do and your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, Joey. Thank you for having me.
Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Joining me today is Michelle Gilbert, Director of Housing and Advocacy with Safe Harbor here in Upstate South Carolina. Safe Harbor has been on the front lines for years, helping victims of domestic violence and their children find safety, stability, and a path forward, not just through emergency shelter, but long-term housing, legal advocacy, and real support that helps families rebuild their lives. Michelle, first of all, thank you for the work that you do, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Let's just start at the beginning. For listeners who may not be familiar with Safe Harbor, give us the big picture. What is Safe Harbor, and who do you serve across our community?
Absolutely. Safe Harbor offers a continuum of services for survivors of domestic abuse and their children. We primarily serve the Greenville, Anderson, Pickens, and Oconee counties area. Our services include a 24/7 helpline, safe emergency shelters, counseling, advocacy, transitional housing, domestic abuse education, as well as other supportive services for survivors.
Your title is Director of Housing and Advocacy. Talk with us about the importance of stable housing when helping someone escape domestic violence and in their attempt to truly start a new life.
Housing is fundamental. You know, a lot of times we hear people say, you just need to leave, but leave and go where? Without stable and supportive housing, it is often very difficult, for a survivor to start over. In fact, homelessness is often very high among survivors of domestic abuse because of the challenges, of housing. So housing is fundamental in every way. We have to give people pathways beyond just an initial exit.
Now, when someone reaches out to Safe Harbor for help, and with me today is Michelle Gilbert, Director of Housing and Advocacy with Safe Harbor, what typically happens first? Walk us through that initial moment when someone reaches out and says, I need you.
That can look different for many different survivors, just depending upon, where they are and where they want to be. We are rooted in empowerment, so we go with the survivor. For many survivors, the first time they reach out to us, they're looking for information. Maybe they're not ready to leave the relationship that they're in, and that can happen for a myriad of reasons, and sometimes not the reasons that we always, assume. We know that leaving is oftentimes the most dangerous time. So just information, about domestic abuse or different pathways or options, for services. Sometimes they're at the place where they're in need of emergency shelter. It is paramount for them or their children to be able to leave the situation that they're in. And so they're calling in and they're looking for emergency shelter, and we are able to do an intake right away and give an immediate decision. Many times it's also to get connected, to other services, whether that's our community services and clinical program that offers counseling and child and family services. So it could be a myriad, of different reasons, but we meet the survivor where they are. We do a lot of safety planning. We do a lot of talking about, what if this happens and what are some safe pathways? Who are some other people that we can bring into the conversation that can be supportive? Safe Harbor is certainly a wonderful and vital resource to survivors, but we're not the only resource, and we recognize that this is a community issue. So many times it takes a community approach, and many collaborative partners are at the table.
Yeah. Michelle, you mentioned emergency shelter, and we hear that term a lot, but Safe Harbor really goes beyond that, right? I mean, talk with us about long-term housing and the supportive services that come along with that.
Absolutely. Like I said, leaving is just one part, of the puzzle. Of course, once a person comes into shelter, we do everything that we can to help establish, their basic, needs. But then we work with them in regards to what does your next look like? So offering that intensive advocacy and case management. For some, that really is, looking for employment. For others, that's looking at, for housing, and we help navigate relationships, with landlords. We have, a client assistance fund that is able to provide some financial support, to survivors that are transitioning, out of the shelter and looking for more, permanent, housing. A lot of times it's advocacy, because for various reasons. Many times there may be background challenges, whether the survivor has not been able to work and they don't have 3 times, the rent, or there may have been an eviction, on their background because there was a shared lease. And so when they left, then both parties, received, the eviction. So we work within those realms and work in collaboration with our community partners to provide some pathways to stability. We also offer a furniture program in which we're able to help survivors, hit reset with some basic needs, some furnishing and things that they need to be able, to start again. And that program is completely run through the generosity and donation, of our community.
Yeah. My guest today is Michelle Gilbert with Safe Harbor. If you'd like additional information about this great program here in the Upstate, doing a lot of good, just visit their website, safeharborsc.org, safeharborsc.org. Michelle, talk with us about some of the most common misconceptions that people have about domestic violence and the individuals who experience it.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that domestic violence happens to other people, right? That it's not the people that you know or the people that you associate with. And reality is we know that domestic abuse happens, across all segments, of our society. It's not just a women's issue. We know that men are impacted by domestic abuse. We know that those that are economically challenged are certainly impacted by domestic abuse, but it can also be seen on the other spectrum. Sometimes the difference is just the support. So you may not see those with lower income and shelter, but it certainly does not mean that it doesn't happen. It happens in communities of faith. It happens in rural communities. It happens in urban communities. Chances are, you think about 3 people that 1 in 3 people will be impacted by domestic abuse, in any given year. Also, I think, right here at home in South Carolina, a lot of times, we're known for our small towns and friendly spaces. And so we say, oh, well, that's not an issue, here in South Carolina. That's something that you see, in bigger areas. But South Carolina has consistently ranked, in the top 10 for lives lost due to domestic abuse. Wonderful things about our state, but we also have some startling secrets, especially around, domestic abuse. I think, too, a lot of people assume that people stay because they're in love, and they just cannot imagine their life, without, that individual. And certainly, this is not a stranger. So love certainly is an emotional ties or element, but it goes so much deeper than that. Oftentimes people are afraid, to leave because, one, safety, as I mentioned earlier. When you leave an abusive relationship, that is a time when you're most likely to lose your life. Also, there are the financial ramifications. We know that survivors are often, especially mothers, are sometimes more likely to lose custody, of their children, due to the domestic abuse, not necessarily because they are the aggressor or because they're engaged, but many times because they don't have the financial and the supportive resources, to be able to leave. Abusers are often really good about cutting off connection and isolating, those that they do harm. And unfortunately, without support, when you are isolated and without resources, it makes it very difficult to leave, even if you want to leave.
Yeah. Michelle, I want to go back and visit. You mentioned men are sometimes victims of domestic abuse, and I really think that probably is one of the biggest misconceptions. But you're right. I mean, men can be victims as well, right?
Absolutely. And we certainly have, seen an increase, in male victims, reaching out, for services. Prior to COVID, we were primarily limited to just serving those that identified, as female and their children. But one of the lessons that came out of COVID was we were able to offer a hotel program. And through our hotel program, we were able to serve more male survivors, and their children. And since then, we've continued, to see male survivors reaching out, and seeking services. By far, the numbers are much larger, among females. And I think that's due to, a variety of reasons. But male survivors, do exist, and abuse does not discriminate based upon gender.
Michelle Gilbert is Director of Housing and Advocacy with Safe Harbor here in Upstate, South Carolina. If you'd like information, you can find them online at safeharborsc.org, safeharborsc.org. From your perspective, what are the warning signs that friends and family members or maybe neighbors, coworkers should be paying attention to when someone may be in an unsafe situation?
I think oftentimes we look for, the visible bruises or the scars, right? And so that is a reality. But what I want to point out is that generally by the time a person gets to the point where they are causing physical harm, the domestic abuse has gone on for much longer than that. We know that abuse shows itself, in multiple ways, whether it's, isolation, financial, using the children. I think one of, the biggest, signs that friends and families can look for is if a person goes off radar, if they are isolating, themselves, you're having trouble, making, contact, or even when you're able to make contact, the person causing harm or the suspected person, causing harm is policing, all of, the interactions as well. Certainly that can be, a huge sign, the isolation piece.
Yeah. Michelle, you guys also work with children who witness this domestic violence. Why is that so important, and what does that help look like in real life with the kids?
Well, first and foremost, because we know that children are survivors as well, right? Those that witness, abuse are more likely to continue the cycle of violence, not because there's something innately built inside of them that makes them susceptible to harm or to causing harm, but because we oftentimes mimic what we see, right? So if our definition, of healthy is growing up in an abusive home, then oftentimes that's what we accept and that's what we normalize. So it's so important that, we have outreach, to children, early on, especially those that have experienced domestic abuse, to be able to interrupt, that cycle of violence and to be able to show, what healthy, looks like. Because domestic abuse is a choice, it is when a person, chooses to have power and control, over another person. And even if children are not exposed to domestic abuse, it's important that we begin having the conversation. And we do that through our relationship education project where we're in schools and we work with local youth groups, or we talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. What are boundaries? If I'm in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or, a dating relationship, and I'm not comfortable or things, are going left, what are some things that I can do? How can I recognize, some of the signs of manipulation and control early on? Whether it's, someone is putting an air tag in my backpack, or someone is has snap maps and they're constantly following, my every move. If I'm not allowed to talk to other friends, oftentimes those are indicative, of an unhealthy relationship. And so having those conversations, early on are so very important, because we know many times that kids have their first experience, with dating abuse in middle school. So it's so important that we start having those conversations early and frequently.
How can our community of listeners here today get involved, whether that's volunteering, donating, or just simply being better informed and more supportive? What suggestions do you have?
I think there are a couple of things. I think one, educate. It's so important that we educate ourselves and continue to have the conversation that we're having today. So if you're involved, in a youth group, a social club, your workplace, bring us in. We're always welcome, to come in and talk about, our mission, and more importantly, why we do the things, that we do. I also think just as individuals in the community, we have an obligation to be ambassadors, about social problems within our society. This is one of those. So being able to speak out and bring awareness, to domestic abuse, as well as resources that are available for those that may be struggling, is huge. So that educate and empowerment. We also ask that you engage with us. We have lots of incredible things going on at Safe Harbor. We are in the midst, of completion of a brand new, campus, which will co-locate all of our administrative services, our shelter services, and our community services in Greenville County under one roof. It's a tremendous undertaking. We're more than doubling our current, bed capacity to be able to meet the growing need in our community. And we still need donors. We still need financial resources to be able to see this project through and to make sure that it is sustainable for our agency and present in the community long before our tenure. Also, we need volunteers, whether it's on our helplines, helping with a community education, doing different projects, at the shelter. Maybe you are a landlord or you know other people that own rental property, or you're in the area of affordable housing. We need you to partner with us. Housing is the biggest issue that we often face, with survivors. There are so very few options. And so the more partnerships we can bring to the table, the more hope we can create, for pathways. If you have old furniture, you're cleaning out, as the seasons, are turning, and you've still got some great things, but you don't need them anymore. Our furniture donation program, we take donations, as well. I encourage people to go to our website. There are lots of different ways that you can engage. We're also looking for interns. So if you are a student or you know someone, that is a student, especially within the human service, field, and you're looking for an internship placement, we may be a good fit, for you as well. So lots of ways. Educate, empower, and engage are huge.
And again, that website is safeharborsc.org. If you have some time, you'd like to volunteer, it's easy to donate as well. And if you need help, call their 24/7 helpline, 800-291-2139. Michelle, thank you again for your time and for the great work you guys are doing in our community.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this special weekend edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.